Hi, it's Teresa from Dodge, and time for another Nature to Go. Now, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, the prairie had a very purple hue to it, but that's changed. This time of year, there's a lot of changes very quickly in the plant life around us as they're sort of racing the clock to finish their growing and get their seeds set before winter starts. And now if you head out towards the prairie, you're going to notice it's very yellow all over the place on the prairie. So what are all these yellow plants? We're going to start with the shortest plant first and work our way up to those taller plants. So the first plant that we're going to notice is the bird's foot's trefoil. That's really low to the ground. It's a sprawling plant. It doesn't have tall stems like we might think of some of these other plants. Now, why it's called bird's foot is because after the flowers are done blooming, the seed pods are dark and they look like a bird's foot. That's how it got its name. Next up are the black-eyed Susans. Now, this is kind of a misname because the center part isn't really black. It's sort of more reddish brown. So depending on where you are living, these are not always called black-eyed Susans, but are often called brown-eyed Susans. Next up is Rosinweed. Reach out and feel the leaves on this plant and you'll recognize it every single time. They feel like sandpaper. This isn't a plant that is one that was used by animals very much because it's sort of an unpleasant feel, but it is used by pollinators quite a bit, as many of these plants are. This is evening primrose, and as you might guess from its name, mostly it's an evening flowering plant, so it's pollinated by moths. In the autumn, it will turn reddish color, and the seed pods that form look sort of like a bunch of bananas. But for now, you kind of have to search for it out in the prairie. It grows in and among a lot of the other plants, but you'll spot this pale yellowish color, and that's evening primrose. This plant we're looking at is goldenrod, and as we move closer towards autumn, this is going to become the plant that will dominate the prairie and keep it with its yellow color. Sometimes goldenrod is mistaken as the plant that causes hay fever, but we'll talk about that in another episode of Nature to Go and what's really the culprit behind it. Here's our next plant, and you might think, yeah, but that's just like that black-eyed Susan that we saw before. But it's not quite. First off, this is a much taller plant. And secondly, notice how the petals sort of droop. They hang down from the plant. This is Greyheaded Coneflower. This is an important plant for pollinators who are going after it while it's blooming. And then once the seeds are formed, birds use this plant. They eat the seeds. And last but not least, and the tallest, are the cup plants. Now you might have noticed on our prairie that they're right along the edge of the farm road. And you might have thought, what are those plants? They're really tall. They are. They're very, very tall. And they're called cup plant, and for good reason. The way the leaves come together around the square stem, they form a little opening, a little cup shape that water will land in. And this is very attractive to insects, to birds. Sometimes we've even found little tree frogs that will hang out in that area because it's a source of water. Birds love the seeds, and so this is also a place where we'll find birds hanging out, goldfinches and sparrows. First off, they can hide, and secondly, they can find food from the seeds of this plant. I named this program Nature to Go because I wanted people to get outside and notice what's happening in nature, because a lot of times things change very quickly. It was only a couple of weeks ago, it was very purple on the prairie, and now it's yellow, and in a couple of weeks, a lot of that yellow will even be gone. So get out and notice what's happening in your area, in your own yard. What's there right now, and what's going to be changing in the near future. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Nature to Go, and we'll talk to you again next time.